Hello, everybody. This is your host, Aram Melkoumov, and you're listening to yet another episode of the Product Innovation Series. Today, I'm joined with Tudor Munteanu, who is originally from Romania and has worked in product in different roles before becoming a VP of Product Engineering at Aizon. Tudor, thank you for accepting the invitation to join us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Cool. First question I have is more, I guess, of a personal question, but
Sure.
as I'm based in Barcelona, and I think you are as well, how has been your relocation here? Because I believe you're from Romania.
Yes. I'm from Romania. I believe Barcelona is an emerging IT and overall technology hub in Europe, and also it's a very cosmopolitan city. So I think I've been lucky to land in this city and to find the opportunities I have found. So it has just been a professional growth since I arrived there. I'm very thankful for being there, and I never felt unwelcome, let's say. It was quite the opposite.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've been here 3 years. I came here from Toronto with my wife and kids, and we love it. No plans on going back.
Glad to hear.
Yeah. um, so the next question I have is about kind of the company you're at, the industry that's in. So if I'm not mistaken, Aizon, the company is working in a very highly regulated industry.
That's correct.
Lots of your clients are pharma and medical companies. So maybe we could start off by if you telling us, the audience, what Aizon is, what's the product offering, and then I could go into some of the follow-up questions around how difficult it was to kind of like manage the product creation in this regulated industry.
Sure. Well, Aizon offers a SaaS aimed to improve or optimize the pharmaceutical manufacturing process. So basically, it's your regular analytics platform, if you want to, but aimed for pharmaceutical manufacturing. So then the regulations are very harsh in this sense, because basically our platform can be used to manage the drug manufacturing process and optimize it and take decisions in this process. So, of course, no decision should be based on erroneous information, because then the consequences would be dire, right?
Mm-hmm. And how do you ensure that? Because I'm assuming a lot of your clients, pharma, medical companies, really depend on data.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that there is strong data capture, that it's all accurate information? What kind of product protocols or principles did you put into the creation of the solution to ensure that it's 100% accurate?
Yeah. Unfortunately, this industry, the pharma and biotech industry, is laggard in terms of technology or IT, because them adopting a new software means validating it, and the validation process is very expensive and requires a lot of effort. So then they prefer to stick with their own methods based on past technologies, or even based on pen and paper, right? So they prefer this aspect. So then data capture becomes a problem, because their data is disparate in various systems, or even, like I said, on pen and paper. And each client has their own particular data persistence systems or their own paper formats. So then it's really difficult to have a standard process or protocol to capture this data. We opted on the IoT technology. We're using the AWS cloud, and we opted on the IoT technology, and we have a very versatile client to capture the data, a client that runs on customer premises. And this can be configured or even further developed to adapt to various circumstances of data persistence. Then, with this versatility, there's a cost in user experience, right? Because it's not easy to set up this client for a wide array of data sources. And then we do a lot of bespoke approaches for each customer in order to ensure data capture. Finally, another problem here is the structure of the data. So we cannot really come with a standard structure, so we need to accept unstructured data, and this puts a lot of stress on the technology we use, because there are various use cases, various data velocity, volume, and variety for each customer, so we have a lot of custom approaches for each customer.
So you mentioned something about the validation process.
Yeah.
So what, from your experience now working with a slew of different types of clients, which do things very differently in terms of how they structure the data, persist it, all these things, what could you say could be done better to manage the validation process?
I think trying to stick to a particular standard would help in this sense. So our industry is governed by several standards. For example, ISO 88 or ISO 95, which kind of explain the informational structure within their manufacturing operations, and thus trying to stick to a standard would help this validation process. But like I said, each customer has their own data structures and data sources, so the validation needs to be, again, bespoke.
Okay, and as a product engineer, which is interesting, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what have you done, or how has it affected your decisions in terms of going through these knowledge opportunities with these clients, in terms of understanding the different ways that people do things? How have you made the product that you've been building a bit more, flexible, a bit more agnostic to being able to handle different types of client needs?
Sure. We have decided to basically abstract the domains or the data objects. Let me put it like this. We decided to design an abstract model in our platform that tries to represent various data objects or sources of data, from sensors to what I call recipes. It's another, let's say, type of data object that they use. So in this sense, the product can be used for any type of project that needs to handle data or needs to derive business intelligence from data. And this is the positive side of having it built like this, having it abstracted, right? In order to be able to work with any type of data structures. But then there's a negative side to it, which is this abstraction is a layer of complexity, So our users are accustomed to their own universe, their own ontology, right? So they would need to learn our own ontology, our own abstractions, and be able to map what we have with what they have in order to reap the benefits of using our product.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I don't think I asked this question, but what's like the end goal of what your product gives to your clients? Is it determination around what more to manufacture based on demand? Is it supply chain efficiency, analytics? Like what is like the main goals that
Sure.
The clients look at?
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, they're looking to optimize their manufacturing process. So pharmaceutical and biotech, especially biotech manufacturing, is very, very complex. So the operations that they do and the processes that they do are very complex, and there are a lot of data attributes that explain each step in a process. So imagine it like a cooking recipe. You need to cook something. In the same way, you need to produce a medicine. So whatever you need to cook needs to always have the same qualities at the end, right? So imagine having to cook the same paella, right? It has to have the same color, the same texture, the same, etc. at the end every time you cook it. So you need to respect then a lot of process parameters. So There is this process, the process of biotech and pharma manufacturing is affected by multivariance. Like I said, a lot of attributes, hundreds of attributes explaining how the process goes. For example, a fermentation process, right? There are hundreds of attributes that explain how this process goes. So it's really hard to control this process by controlling all of these attributes. So in this sense, providing them with technology, with the proper technology, so capturing the data through IoT, providing machine learning algorithms, AI model deployment and management inside the platform, and finally, business intelligence dashboards. We help them control all these hundreds of attributes and better harness, in this sense, their process and understand how it can be improved. So, for example, they could predict if something would go wrong, or they could develop the signature of what they call a golden batch. So the best batches that they have produced over time, like what determined that golden batch out of the hundreds of attributes that explains what a batch really is, So this is just pure data, right? We don't need to dwell into biotech concepts, This is just data explaining other data.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about now product management, product engineering.
Sure.
So I haven't actually had the privilege to speak to somebody who's a product engineer. I mean, I'm curious to know if you see that as the same thing as like a software engineer, or would you consider it a bit different? Maybe let's start there, and then I'll get into the product management side of things.
I think that this term that our C-level chose of product engineering comes from the idea of us aiming or being a product company, right? So we are software engineers, of course, but then our team is called product engineering.
Okay. All right. So then from a product engineering and product management standpoint, I think you previously mentioned to me that these two disciplines should, or in many ways, be merged together or are very close together. So why do you think that?
Sure.
And let's start there.
I think nowadays an engineer needs to first accomplish a vertical knowledge base, like being a good developer in a particular language, or being a good DevOps, let's say. But later on, in order to further grow and be a good engineer at work, let's say, I think engineers need to develop horizontally as well. So try to understand the business, try to understand product management, try to understand the market, and so forth. So using their vertical knowledge and skill set to offer a solution that would help somebody, right? So it's not about engineering a tool that is an amazing engineering work, but it's about engineering a tool that provides benefits to someone in order to do something, right? So these latter aspects are often put aside by engineers, let's say. That's why I believe engineering and product management for a software product company should be merged as much as possible.
So what kind of skills do you think a product engineer should learn and develop in order to have that more of that horizontal knowledge base?
Sure. I think skills belonging to product management would be a good start. I don't know if it's really a skill set, and I don't know if it's about hard skills. I think it's about soft skills, at least as much as hard skills, So being empathetic with your end user, or even understanding, like I said, the business would be very helpful. Or even adopting a work methodology like domain-driven design, which merges all of these concepts together, the business, the product, and engineering, would help you move forward in this direction.
Okay. And do you think that this is this type of tradecraft, or this concept of product engineering and product management being a lot closer together, is that relevant to all companies, you think, now going forward, or is it more towards the regulated ones, like, the ones that you work in?
Mm. I think it would fit most companies, like I said, especially if they would be a software product company, if they would call themselves like this. As for regulated companies, from our experience, initially it was, let's say, difficult to juggle with all these domains and concepts together. But in the end, is fairly easy because regulations require quality from you, and a means to document and measure said quality. So, like I said, adopting a particular methodology and documenting the way you work and the way you follow this methodology and setting your targets and measuring how far or close you are from your targets would mean a good qualitative work, and it would be helpful in regulated environments as well.
Okay. And you briefly touched upon already domain-driven design.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't heard that term many times, so I wanted to first ask you, what is it? How do you define domain-driven design?
Sure. It's it's a work methodology that tries to capture the use cases that you try to solve and place them in what's called a problem space. And from that problem space, you can derive a solution space, and this space is grouped into particular domains that you try to handle. So in our case, we need to capture the data, we need to contextualize and manipulate the data, we need to build dashboards, we need to build AI models. So far I mentioned several concepts that could be domains, let's say, like data capture. But the important thing is that these domains need to be derived from the business process, right? So it's business and the business model itself that defines these domains, and later on, by following the methodology, you can even architect your software surrounding these domains and respecting each domain by itself and the way they interact with each other.
And in your opinion, why do you think domain-driven design must be implemented in companies? Does it help streamline things, organize processes, focus, organization?
Okay, I think you, well, first of all, must is kind of too constrictive, let's say. It's just one methodology, one that I'm more accustomed with or that I fancy, let's say. Maybe, I mean, not maybe, there are other methodologies out there which would be useful, let's say. But I think just like I mentioned before, that engineering needs not to be purely the back office and let's say the kitchen work. I think domain-driven design offers a path towards merging all the disciplines together, and in this sense, yes, streamlining the process so that engineers are really close to sales, for example, or marketing, right? So that everybody understands the entire pipeline from requirements gathering to delivering the solution.
Okay. All right, just a couple more questions, Tudor. I wanted to change focus towards another kind of angle. So I wanted to ask, what do you feel? Because I'm assuming you work with a lot of other product leaders in your organization.
Yes.
Being in the VP of product engineering, there must be your counterpart in product.
Yes.
Who you work with. So I wanted to ask you, what do you feel product directors or VPs of product, not in your specific company, but maybe in others you worked in, still do often these days that don't get them a good product at the end of the day?
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe fighting this tug of war in between product management and engineering. is something that's not really helpful, but also something hard to avoid. So what I mean by this tug of war is paying functional debt versus paying technical debt, for example, and fighting with people or resources towards which way to go, right? So maybe this would mean that the two disciplines are separated, right? And they fight for resources and interests. And then again, merging the two and trying to put the two disciplines together on the same path for the same goals would maybe counteract this approach. But this is very philosophical what I'm saying, right? So each company needs to find their own way to move forward and take this approach.
So just for the audience to understand, how would you explain the difference between functional debt and technical debt?
Sure. Well, maybe technical debt is easier to understand because it's a term used more often. So technical debt is when you decide to deliver a feature faster, let's say, without compromising the engineering aspects, right? So maybe having a poor code or having a poor code, having few unit tests or no unit tests written so that you can deliver that feature faster, right? And then the functional debt would be the compromise you make on the functional or product feature side in order so that you can use the resources to pay technical debt, so improving the architecture or reworking the code, just to make it more readable, means that you cannot afford to work in something else, right? So it could incur functional debt in this sense.
Okay. So you talked about the tug of war between the resources side. I want to ask you another question, which is, in your experience, what steps when it comes to the creation of product development do you feel are still being skipped upon or missed entirely?
Okay, I think a very important step comes after product development. So basically, validating your proposal, validating your delivery, let's say. So let's imagine we would work with OKRs. Then we develop something, we ship something. Now is the time to measure those key results, right? Now is the time to measure that our output, what we have delivered, has the expected outcome, right? Touches the objective, moves the needle in the direction we want, and so forth. So in my experience, at times I felt we are very much focused in the delivery itself, the output, right? Without paying too much attention on the outcome, right? So what comes after the delivery, how useful is that? How our users are interacting with the new feature? What does this bring for them, and so forth,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Last question group I have is around biases.
Yeah.
So having spoken to a lot of different people in product, there's all different types of biases: cognitive bias, data bias, etc.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you about what biases have you come across in decision making that you have seen prevent product people working effectively?
Sure. In our case, the complexity of our domain, so biotech manufacturing, and the complexity of our product, technologies like machine learning and IoT and so forth, makes it challenging to control all aspects, right? Technological and market-wise. So then at times I believe there's a tendency that we cannot see the forest because of the trees, so we are stuck into our own definitions and our own technologies and pursuing an output like I previously mentioned, and let's say forget or omit about the actual outcome. So maybe maybe 2 lines of code applying the Pareto principle. Maybe 2 lines of code would deliver 80% of the expected outcome, right? So it's not so much about how much we can deliver and how much we can code, but it's about the actual value we offer, the outcome. So then the bias would be, in my experience, towards this, right? Not seeing the forest because of the trees and chasing the output instead of managing the outcome.
Chasing the output instead of managing. Okay. And so if you were to be able to come up with a solution to counteract that, how would you set that in motion?
Sure. So like I previously said, adopting a methodology, OKRs or domain-driven design and so forth, a methodology that merges all the business aspects together, the business process, product engineering. I think it would help everybody chasing the North Star of the company, whatever that would be. And from time to time, I think having cross-departmental meetings and strategic meetings are also helpful into realigning and putting everybody on the same path, right? So I think in this sense, periodic strategic meetings and methodology to help you plow through this approach, through these operations would be a good way to go.
Okay. All right. Last question I have is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would want to share with the audience listening in terms of, your experience, or maybe a big takeaway that you would want them to come out of this, listening to this recording?
All right. I think when we, in my case, when we try to improve a particular metric, given we have constant resources or constant number of people or revenue or something like this, I think when you try to improve one particular metric of your department or your business, you should expect a compromise with a different metric, So if we want to improve quality, it would have a hit on speed, for example, and vice versa. So in this sense, I think managers should be, again, aware of all the disciplines in the company so that they can better juggle with these different metrics and do a really good risk assessment before deciding which way to go, and try to predict the compromises and the impacts one decision would create.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Tudor, for all your valuable insight and for giving us some time today. And always thank you to our listeners for tuning in and supporting the show. And stay tuned for our next episode.